Hello, good afternoon, humans of Macondo, LitFest. How are you all doing? Yeah? Goodness. Can I have like a little bit more enthusiasm? How are you all doing? Yes, thank you. Welcome to this session. I'm so excited because we have just an extraordinary conversation lined up for you. My name is Aleya Kassam, and I'm going to kind of guide us through today. And it's really just such a pleasure to introduce to you what today's poetry feast is about. So I'll read to you from the program. Here we go. All right. History writes poetry. 4 poetesses who derive inspiration from their poetry from histories and memories. How do they turn history into lyrics? Featuring Yara Monteiro from Angola, Portugal, right to my very other end. Hi, Yara.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Yes. We have Roberta Estrela D'Alva. Did I pronounce that correctly, Roberta? From Brazil. Yes. And Sylvie Kandé from Senegal and the US. So today we're going to be talking about some poetry. We're going to hopefully hear some poetry. We might even be inspired to write some poetry. If you are inspired and you write, just have your pen and paper out, and later on in the evening during the closing ceremony, if you want to perform or share, there'll be a space for that too. So now I'd like to introduce to you one by one each of the poets so that you have a flavor of their work, and then after that we'll ask them to share a little bit. I'll start with Sylvie Kandé. So Sylvie Kandé was the 2021-2022 chair of the Department of History and Philosophy at SUNY, is that SUNY, Old Westbury? She's the author of 3 collections of poetry published by Gallimard. Her first collection, Lagune, Tableau de Mémoire, was postfaced by Edouard Glissant. Whew, these words are difficult. While her second, La Quête, Infinie de l'autre rive, a finalist for the Mahogany Prize and the Prix des Découvreurs, received the 2017 Prix Lucien Gracia Vincent. She has, as you can see, is like multiple awarded. We're really, really lucky to have her with us. And this book that Sylvie will be reading from, the Epic Canon, is available at Prestige. But now I'd like to invite you to read for us.
Thank you very much. Let me reiterate how honored I am to be here, and how grateful I am also for the warm welcome I have received in Nairobi. So this excerpt that I will first read in French is the beginning of the first canto of this epic, and the mariners are at sea. They know that they are lost, and yet they row. Ils rament désormais, sans chanson ni aon. Depuis combien de temps savoir combien de saisons? Depuis combien, dit le mirage apporté par les vents, ramait-il repu de roulis et gavé d'embrun? Mémoire brouillée de ce que c'est que d'avoir les pieds sur terre et paupières en chamade, il ne se soucie plus à présent que de la vague qui va, se dérobe et revient. Paysans qui sur le tard s'étaient fait marins, ils cadencent leur corps pour fendre de la pointe gâtée de l'aviron les mottes violettes de la grande savane salée que nul sillon ne marque ou nulle semence ne lève, mais à dire la mer peussiérait les maux de la terre. Au point de ce rêve, ils étaient une myriade, ni plus ni moins, qui passèrent en riant la barre de corail et ses fleurs vermeilles. N'en reste que 3 barques en dérade, pleines, mais pleines à chavirer.
So this particular one has been translated into English by Alexander Dicau, and so I'll read the English. Ever since they row songless, no heave-ho, for how long, how to know, how many seasons, how many mirage islands the wind will sow, did they row past pitch-drunk and swollen with spindrift, a foggy memory of what it is to have one's feet on the ground and eyelids fluttering. They heed nothing at present but the wave that goes, slips away, and returns. Country folk who made themselves belated mariners, their bodies cadence them to cleave with the oar's tainted tip, the purple mounds of the great salt savanna, which no furrow marks, where no seed takes root. But to say the sea earthly words are little suited. At the point of the dream, they were a myriad, no less and no more. To cross the coral barrier in laughter with its vermilion flowers. There remain but 3 barks adrift, full, so full, to the point of capsizing. Sylvie, can I ask you to tell us a little bit about this piece of work? And
yes. This piece is the meeting of 2 different projects. I was actually writing an essay on the representation of the Middle Ages in Ivoirian, in the novels written by an Ivoirian novelist, and I stumbled across a text that was written by Al-Umari, so an Arab traveler from the 16th century, I believe, who went to West Africa and recorded what he had heard and what was the stories that were circulating around. And one passage of what he wrote really struck me in a particular way. This is the relation of a moment in the trip that Mansa Musa, whom you know as being a Malinke emperor, who made the pilgrimage to Mecca in 1325. So Mansa Musa arrives in Cairo, and there with gold, with all his retinue, and there everybody wants to know how is Mali and what's going on there, and the governor of Cairo interviews him, and this interview is recorded, allegedly, and the governor is eager to know how Islam is practiced in Mali, but also how Mansa Musa came to power. And Mansa Musa would have said, well, the king who was my predecessor didn't believe that there was nothing behind the horizon. So to make a long story short, Abu Bakr II, his predecessor, decides to launch pirogues, boats, towards the horizon to know what is behind. And before leaving, he tells Mansa Musa, well, if I do not return, you will be my successor. He, just like Don Sebastian, he never returned, and Mansa Musa came to power. So this is an apocryphal story, because the same narrative is taken over and over by various historians, and you know that in history you need 2 unrelated sources to establish historical truth. So this historical truth is not established. But for a poet, the lack of archive is actually a blessing, because now I could do with Abu Bakr II whatever I wanted. And what I wanted to do, and this is several things. First of all, I was in awe when I read that sentence, you know, someone who couldn't believe that there was nothing behind the horizon. The poetry of the sentence just, you know, struck me very, very deeply, especially because this is a sentence that came to us through translation, through retranscription, and yet the beauty and the power is still there. But I had also, I was really deeply upset by the reports I had started seeing about African migrants coming by boat to Europe. Many of the boats, of course, capsized. Many African lives were lost in the passage, once again. And I was upset also by the treatment that newspaper did of it, you know, emphasizing the poverty of the migrants, you know, their despair. And it seemed to me that there was something very, very crucial that was missing in those narratives. And what was missing, I could find it in the story of Abu Bakr II, you know, the sense of honor, the desire to go to the other shore, the desire to know the self, to know the other, and to give back to the community. So the idea, really well expressed also by Barsa or Barzak, the idea that I will attempt to fulfill my role as a member of a community, as a provider, and if I cannot do it, I will die trying. So all of a sudden I had that, you know, and the analogy between the two projects sort of came to life, and I started writing.
Amazing, thank you. Thank you so much, Sylvie. So we go from an epic canon to actually let me read Roberta's bio for you. So Roberta is a Brazilian actress, director, poet, spoken word artist, activist, and researcher of subjects like voice, orality, and memory. Founding member of the Núcleo Bartolomeu de Depoimentos, first Brazilian hip-hop theater company. That's very cool. She's the creator and presenter of ZAP, the first Brazilian poetry slam, and curator of the Rio Poetry Slam Flip, the first international poetry slam in Latin America. At the festival, she'll perform in Portuguese with a simultaneous English translation. So this was yesterday evening, and there's some really incredible. If you go to the Macondo LitFest Instagram, you'll see just how spectacular it was. And I think it's kind of giving me goosebumps how we're going from, you know, a poet who writes an epic canon to now a slam poet. Roberta, would you share with us some of your work?
Hello, good afternoon to all. Hello. Oi, mambo! I learned this word yesterday with my new friends, Lynn Chaka and all the crew. So I will read from my memory because I'm a neuro poet. So it's Diaspora is called the poem, and as we don't have subtitles, I'll say this in Portuguese. This diaspora idea, well, I don't know if you know, in Brazil, we had like almost 400 years of slavery. Millions and millions and millions of African people were brought to our ports. And this idea of diaspora is all this, not just these people moving, but all the knowledge that move it with them, all the religion, the ancestrality, the power of healing with words. And all over the world, all these people who brought this knowledge, all these leaders. So I'm talking about this, how this strength can dismiss our complexes of inferiority, all the disease, mental, spiritual disease that we have through this colonizing stuff. And I call the names of the leaders, and in the end, I say, hail to all of them, and a little pray for the orishas. There are these forces of nature that came with them. Also, the forces of the sea, the mud, the fire, the river, the leaf and all the nature forces. I will stand up.
Yes, absolutely.
Abrem-se as portas e a diáspora se levanta e espanta a dor, o medo, a dúvida, desconfianças, inseguranças, complexos de inferioridade, inconsciência, esquecimento. Não dá mais para disfarçar. A hora é agora. Chegou o momento. Identidade. Qual é a sua? Quem é você? Seus pais e os pais de seus pais? Qual a origem da sua cultura? De onde vieram seus ancestrais? Pois respeitar quem veio antes é ensinar quem vem depois, ativar a história, ativar a memória, saber quem é quem, dar nome aos bois. África. Angela Davis, Luísa Marim, Patrick Lumumba, Milka Cabral, Solano Trindade, Mestre Irineu, Malcolm X e James Brown, Stephen Biko, João Cândido, Bob Marley, Huey P. Newton, Martin Luther King, pastor na vida e na morte, guerreiro da marcha da libertação e de todos os mártires da paz, perseguida. Abolicionistas, guerrilheiros, lutadores, guerreiros, quilombolas. E todos que lutaram e deram a vida para que pudéssemos estar aqui agora. Nesse momento entramos em cena, pedimos a todos a participar. E no passado nos foi concedida a permissão para começar. Planto os meus santos, abro o meu canto, me visto de fé, de amor e de paz. Vejo uma estrela se aproximando, toda a grandeza dos orixás. O brilho da lua, do ferro, do fogo, da terra, da lama, o vento e o mar. Peço licença e vou chegando. Respeito e humildade, eu quero é cantar. Hope you could feel it.
I mean, that's the power of poetry. Like, even if you don't understand the language, poetry is the language of feeling. You just feel it in your body.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roberta. Yeah.
Yeah, because I come from this background, this hip-hop background. Rap means rhythm and poetry. You put rhythm to a poetry, and you speak about what affects you, what you can deal no more with your body like this. So you put out moving, put in rhythm, and bring in the memory of those who came before you.
And Roberta, how did this poem come into the world?
This poem, well, I had, how it came to the world, yeah. I had a group, it's called Frente 3 de Fevereiro. It was a group of 21 people that started when they killed in Brazil, police killed in Brazil, a guy called Flávio Ferreira Santana. And he was a black guy, and his father was a policeman. So the police came and said, please put your hands up, and he went to take his identification, and when he did this, police shot. So he was a guy, a lawyer, white girlfriend, policeman was his father, and even having money and a social place, he was killed. So this showed there was not a social problem in Brazil. It was a racial problem. Because even if you have anything that society wants you to have, money, lawyer, white girlfriend, father policeman, if you are black, you're going to be killed. If the children of Beyoncé is there with a shirt, it doesn't matter if she's a Beyoncé child. She can be murdered like our youth is being murdered every 22 minutes is our statistics. 22 minutes a young black kid is killed by police. Is the fact in Brazil. The level of racism that we have there. So this group was created, and we have this show called Football. And we went to Germany, and I have a band also, and then we needed something to start the show. And that summarizes this feeling. And this poem just came just in a room. I'm not a poet of page that sits. It's not I'm an actress first. I'm in the orality. So when I have to write something, it's just because I have to go out in some way, and then I go in the room, do like like this. Sometimes I compose, but it's always, I have things written here in my shoe, in a napkin, and then everything's come together. The two ways, like a vomit, and this way, the one thing from 2000 something, one thing from now that you said, that I write here, collecting, sampling, as the hip-hop people do, cutting pieces of memory, combining them to create a new memory.
I love that. That's really beautiful. And I could really feel like the energy in that piece, like an invoking across time and like bringing it all together in one place. Thank you, Roberta. And now we move to something a little bit more tender, a little bit more personal memory. It's a pleasure to introduce Yara. I'll read Yara's bio for you. From Angola, Portugal. Yara was born in Angola in 1979 and moved to Portugal when she was 2 years old. She writes poetry and fiction. She's collaborated in the creation of scripts and screenplays for audiovisual arts and is a curator for podcast programming. She recently won the Poetry Prize Premio Literario Gloria de Santa Ana and awarded to the author of the best poetry book written in Portuguese. And yesterday, Yara shared a little bit of her poem with us, of her poetry with us yesterday afternoon. And it's my experience of it was very tender, very personal. It's been described as ecofeminist. But I should ask you, Yara, will you share something with us?
Yes. So what I'm going to read to you. Yesterday I even said model 36, but apologize for my English. It's not model 36, it's size 36. And the majority of these poems, they came, at the beginning of these poems were conversations that I had with my grandmother, that she is a size 36. She's 85 and vegetarian, so... So she's always been a very vain, but in the good, elegant woman, like Sylvie. So I'm telling you so you can understand the poem itself. So this was conversations that we had on the kitchen table, not with a bottle of whiskey, because my grandmother, she doesn't drink, but around tea and coffee. And the poem, it's called Size 36, and it tells the story of my grandmother. That could be the story of a lot of African women that when they move to Europe, in this case to Portugal, she had basically to change her way of dressing. So she had to leave the colors behind and become a little bit more gray, a little bit more, use more brown colors. So she left, the poem says that she left the beautiful flowers of her skirt away. And what I wanted to put in the poem was the feeling that and the pain that I could feel in my grandmother's voice, that it was almost like she had to rip her own skin and seize a new skin. So this poem, it's a woman really picking up a fabric, but the fabric, in fact, it's a new skin. Okay, I'm going to first read in Portuguese, and then I translate a little bit in the end. Manequim 36. Vejo-a abrir a burda, procurar o risco condicente do molde para o vestido parco e castanho. Uma vez mais jura, seria a última. A dureza enxovalhara as rosas, as margaridas, as camélias e as madressilvas. Uma vez mais. E tão vívidas, no rubor de suas saias, cantam à gente cinzenta, sisuda, reverberam abrigo cálido, jardim, saudade, dão sol às suas pernas escuras. Uma vez mais, jura, seria a última. As flores clandestinas redupiam na ligoteira da cidade, tão vívidas que eram. Tão vívidas que eram. Papel vegetal decalca traços tristes. Lápis encarnado marca prudência. Alfinete criva seus novos costumes. Agulha alinha a ilusão. Despe a sua pele. Corta, rasga, fere, esconde. Corta, rasga, fere, esconde. Corta, rasga, fere, esconde. O melhor de mim eram as cores. So it is the description of a woman that she has like this sewing machine. She has a sewing machine, and on the process of leaving her clothes, her land behind, she talks about the flowers that she has in her skirt, but reminds her garden in Angola. Yeah, and then so she used the paper when you have these when you're doing clothes. Yeah, you can have this paper. And when she's drawing a new dress, in fact, also she's trying to draw new ways of living. When she's cutting her dreams, but she feels she's losing something. So she says, "I'm going to do this, but this is going to be the last time. I'm going to do it, but this is the last time. I'm going to do it, but this is the last time." So she has an internal conflict. And at the end, when I say, o melhor de mim eram as cores, what she says is, the best of me were the colors. Because the colors, it's a true identity, it's a true country, it's what she really is.
And Yara, how did this collection of poems come into the world?
By sitting and writing. There's no other way. No, this particular compilation of poems, okay, it's a mixture between the stories of my grandmother. She's a gatekeeper of a lot of family stories, and also from her own stories. And unfortunately, during the first lockdown, due to the COVID, she had a physical and a mental breakdown. So I took her to my house, and I stayed taking care of her. And of course, the name of the book is Memories, Apparitions, that it means ghosts, memory, ghosts, and arrhythmias, because it was really the summary of what I experienced. What I experienced during those times that I was with her, because this is something that I also learned with life. Doesn't matter how old you are, you're gonna say, "I still remember when your grandfather was looking to this woman, and I dreamed last night." And I say, so a lot of the poems. I'm trying to use some fun to talk about very difficult subjects. So a lot of poems really was a transcription of my grandmother traumas, because she's a woman. She was an African woman, Angolan woman. She also had her own life. She had a mother. She had a mother that was obliged to marry, not married, because in that time it was not, there was not even consent marriage, because my grandmother, she met my grandfather the day they went to pick her up at her house. So there's a poem called Letter to Mushima. Mushima is an Angolan saint, and I put myself in the place of my grandmother, writing this letter to Mushima, because it was also something that I learned on my research, that in Angola a lot of people would write wishes to saints. And I learned also more details about that history and how traumatized was for my grandmother to be left with her two sisters when they were 7, 8, and 9, because the mother ran away because she was not happy. She didn't want it to be with that white man. So, Carta to Nossa Senhora da Mushima tells that history. But I also, as a lot of writers, I had plenty of time being locked at home to go through my own booklets and notebooks. So there's also some poems that are not completely, it's a completely vibe, but they all related, in fact, with the violence towards the female body. So I also have poems that I had wrote quite a long time ago. I also have a poem that I love, that it's called Pub Royal, and it's from my experience when I was living in Angola. I used to live in a street where there was a bar, a sex workers bar, and I used to go there before the night starts to get a beer, and we became friends, and it was super amazing because we always find some points in common, and they become my sisters. And so I tell also this different perspective of womanhood, of how powerful can be for a woman to have a man paying her for sex to satisfy a desire. So there's also a lot of, as I said, the body being. I use poetry also to analyze my own sexuality in terms of as a person, as a woman, but also what sexuality means in the patriarchal world and how it can be used as a weapon through rape towards women and through rape towards nature. So a lot of my poems also they create this stream of connection between the women body and the nature's body. Maybe I should read. I'm not sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Eve's Rebellion. Assobiam ditos do rio íntimo, adensado. É este o sangue que me torna mulher? Se me despir e dispo, se me despedir e despeço, de tudo, de todos, e se empurrar, derrubo a porta do paraíso. Ditos virgens no ventre, levo casa, vila, cidade, mundo, tudo, todos, o universo, e nada levo. Espera. Eu, a criadora, invoco a fêmea, a criatura, aqueduto de águas, boca solta, em verão úmido, ensolarado, ditos da mulher, mitos e narrativas, ditos não ditos, sobre os deltas vivos, infindáveis, assim, semeiam óvulos pelo espaço, pelas órbitas, outras fêmeas e outros ventres, nascentes intocadas, rias que se adensam, caindo como chuva na epiderme do sol, benzendo o portal de luz. O astro descamba no leito onde crescem as raízes, faz chama na vala noturna e rompe a lua febril e circular. Pelos túneis do meu corpo térreo, recolho a límpia seiva, em minhas garras de madre pérola, bebo-a no meu jardim. Não existe nada que devesse ser. É isto que não sou, a terra imitando o sol. Ditos meus não cedem ao rumor do desespero, do passar do tempo. Ditos, não ditos, ditos bíblicos. So basically this poem says that who created the world was Eve and not Adam. It's something like that.
Wonderful. I mean, already just in this little time, we've gone from poetry that kind of imagines gaps in history, you know, from many centuries ago, to poetry that creates links with recent history across geography and like family, very personal poetry, and in many different languages. Thank you very much. I know that there's already questions in the audience, so I'm going to hold my questions and invite you to ask. We'll do 2 questions at a time, and then if we have time later on, then I can ask mine.
My question is for Yara. I'd like to know, first, did your grandmother raise you, or was she in close proximity to you while raising you? And if she did, how did that affect the way you view your own womanhood, watching her having to cast her initial womanhood aside and then pick something else up?
I love my grandmother, but she was an oppressor. I even told her, you oppressed me. Now that you were my biggest oppressor. No, of course she did. I was raised by my grandmother, my grandparents, until my early teens. That's why I'm always talking about them. Not that my mother, she wasn't there. My mother was there, but she was still a teen when she gave birth to me. So it's natural that I had a stronger connection with my grandmother. No, because I was raised like Vittoria in my novel, to be a good wife, to go to church. I was like a church, I wouldn't say promise, until I was 14. I almost learned to read on the Bible. My grandmother, she's still saying, the man is the head of the couple. She's an old lady. You need to understand where she comes from, but on a conscious way, I had to rebel against her. But she's also very open-minded. We sometimes think that old people they're not open-minded. Sometimes they're more open-minded than I would say some young people. They lived more. So, for instance, I have a very explicit sex scene. Oh, no, this one I didn't let her read. The book, the poetry I didn't. But for instance, I had a sex scene very explicit. And of course, you always don't think, oh, what's my grandmother is going to think about? I don't want to hurt her, I don't want to cry. And I say, okay, I'm going to grant that scene, mother, and offer you the book. And she says, no, I want to read it. And she was okay, yeah.
Interesting.
You became modern.
There you go. Your grandmother was a young woman once too, right? There was a question over there.
2 actually. One for Sylvie. It's when you do this research about history and then you recreate the history, are we looking at a new reality, or basically, how faithful are you to history? How faithful in terms of do you reproduce history, or do you, what's the other word? What is the other poetic word? Do you reinterpret, reimagine the history? And then for Yara, you are a novelist and a poet. How does that feel? Does your poetry interfere with your stories, or are they complementary? Do they complement each other in terms of the writing process? Do you write poems in the stories? Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe we can start with Sylvie. The question around how faithful you are to history.
Yes, no, I can operate in two different modalities. When I write as an historian, I have a contract with the truth. I have a specific methodology that guarantees that I remain within objective parameters. I have sources. So in that case, there were no sources really, except that particular text, written by Al-Umari and repeated over and over again. So it's not a work of history, but I think poetry is an attitude. So I can read poetry in all what I do. I can read poetry in faces, places, plants, and texts that are not necessarily poetic. And this is what I was trying to explain, how this particular sentence really struck me, for the power of the words themselves, their beauty, that remain, in spite of all the layers of times that sort of put their patina on it. So in this particular work, no, I'm using this apocryphal story, this apocryphal character, to talk about a contemporary issue, which is migration, and I use, in fact, the form of the epic, because what I want to show is that migrants are the new heroes of our humanity. But in the process, as I was writing about Abu Bakr II, I was caught into his own story. I wanted to know more, and I wanted to make him, in fact, redundant. The poem opens with his men and women. I put women in his boats. Clearly, very independent women. I wanted to, see in him the spirit of the travel, the spirit of the trial. Last night, at the beginning of the show, we had a very powerful image of the sea, all its terrors and beauty. And Abu Bakr II, for me, is mostly that, the spirit of the human spirit that can triumph from, adversity and represent, as the hip-hop say, represent.
Thank you, Sylvie. And Yara, fiction.
Before I answer, I would advise everyone to go buy Sylvie book, and I'm saying this from my heart, because I told her yesterday, because yesterday I started reading the book, and it is really good poetry, and it's really epic, and most important for me, it's super inspiring because of this migration history, and it's about bringing a new light to our hope. Yeah. So for me, writing, whether it's poetry or fiction, is always like being on permanent therapy. and then it's like this. It depends very much on how I want to tell a story. Yeah, because for me, my poems, they're also short stories. They are much more, they're more lyric, and compact, and I believe much more intense. I want to pass a straight message, rather having the reader making questions, I would say. But it is how it came. It's not something that I would say I have a very conscious or systematic process. No, it's very intuitive.
Thank you, Yara. We can take next two questions. I know there was one here and then one there.
Question is to Sylvie. Part of it has been answered in responding to the gentleman across there, but I was also wondering in your imagination of the epic, in writing the epic and imagining the voyage, Abu Bakr II's voyage. I believe this was the second, it must have been the second voyage that was attempted before there was Abu Bakr I, and I'm mixing up the history, but I believe this was the second voyage where they disappeared. But the question I have is, the thought I have is how you imagined the lives of those that were part of the voyage. Were they doing this willingly? Were they ordered by Abu Bakr to do this voyage? Because, of authority, and also whether you see similarities between that kind of epic with the cross-Atlantic slavery, from just the point of power relations and how they would have ended up on that voyage. Abu Bakr himself, obviously, knowing that they might never return, but having this belief in whatever it is they would find on the other side, and then those that are part of the voyage themselves, worried, sick about leaving families and all that behind, and maybe being forced to be part of that voyage, especially the women. It's a thought I wondered about. Thank you.
Yes, you're right. The story is more complicated than my brief summary. Abu Bakr II sent first an expedition with a number of boats and provisions for the voyage and water, and then only one man returned. And this man says, well, when we arrived into the sea, there was like a river, which could be the Gulf Stream. I mean, if we want to, there was like a river, and the other boats in front of me just rushed into it and disappeared, and my boat stayed a little bit back, and I returned. How? We don't know. And here I am, and so once again with a lot of panache, and this is really what I liked. Also the gesture, the kind of. Not accepting destiny, not accepting, transcending the limits. Abu Bakr II, says, okay, in that case, I will go with, even larger number of men and provision, and never return. The question is, of course, that the past seems always more glorious than the present, and this is a trap. In particular, a story like that, if it is looked at in an uncritical way, could be a glorification of an emperor who may have been authoritarian. I attempted to deconstruct epic as I was writing my text. Once I recognized that I was writing an epic, because that was not my intention. It just dawned on me, and I was really afraid when I realized that I was in the process of, the breath and that was terrible. But once I took responsibility for that, of course, a huge number of epics came through my mind. I said, I really do not want to do a nationalist, masculinist type of epic, like there are too many. So how will I do? So I put, first of all, women in the boats to change a little bit the perspective, and also. And in fact, I wrote 2 cantos, and that answers also a little bit your question, 2 cantos about Abu Bakr, because I was not finished to understand what had happened. And I wanted to know everything, how the boats were constructed, how people were recruited. So it required to evoke some touchy issues, such as, slavery, for instance, where slaves, domestic, the type of slavery that existed before the transatlantic slave trade, where slaves, forced to leave, was probably the nobility avoiding to go, and this is the reason why I imagine the mariners as peasants, who go maybe in the name of their attachment to to their emperor, their face, and but are in fact maybe the victims of the hubris of this emperor. So it's not an evangelic type of project in which I glorify this emperor, but there is something. I mean, I must say that there's something attractive about this idea, especially because there hasn't been much of a history of the relationship between Africa and its seas. And so Africans and the sea, this is a kind of unknown territory, uncharted water. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sylvie. And there was a question over there.
In the poem you shared with us earlier, it was very strong on what is going on in Brazil and the racial harm and the injustices that especially young people face in Brazil. I was asking, my question is around the work that you do in poetry and the workshops you run and in your other careers. Do you see that because of this poetry and this reaction through poetry, that you are inspiring and other people are using art as a form to push back, and it's reaching higher levels, like changes are happening and it's spreading?
Well, basically we are working now with poetry slams. There are battles of, I don't know if all you know, but there are battles of spoken word poetry. And we have 200 communities in Brazil right now. And what I've been seeing in these 15 years we were working with this is people coming there and expressing themselves. We have this expression in Brazil, I don't know, you have here that I told yesterday, that is, give the poetry slam, give us voices to young people, or the Macondo festival, the institution X or Y give us voice, or the government. But what we are doing is not we are doing, but what the slam scene is given to these people is not voice because they already have voice, is ears. Because it's different, you have a voice, everybody has a voice. Indigenous people, women, favelas, periphery, but it's different when to be listened. You can have a voice and nobody's listening to it. So it's not a matter of give voice to somebody. I'm avoiding to use this. I'm not giving voice. I'm giving listening. Instead of you give voice to somebody, you shut your mouth and you listen. So this it's very different. We are learning to be quiet and give this round circle to people to be listening. So our rule in this poetry slam is 3 minutes. And somebody said, no, it's 3 minutes. It's just because in half an hour, 10 people speak 3 minutes. In half an hour, 3 people speak 10 minutes. So it's a democratic rule for you have everyone speaking, and those who doesn't have notion, you take the time for them. You have the equality and the years. So in these years, I've been listening to a lot of stories. For example, we have this poet named, no, I won't say her name, but she went there very like this and speaking very low. Next year, and 1 year she came and she had a poem. I was like this listening, and she had a poem about, Dad, why you did this to me? And she's talking about an abuse. And I said, what? We are going too far with this. My God, what a responsibility. She came in this circle and she's telling this. And I think she took this thing of her, put in a poem and led there in a safe circle. And then she became more and more. She's nickname is King. Woman King, like Victoria, like the Viola Davis. King, her nickname. And she just took of her put there in a healing circle that became the Poetry Slam in Brazil. And now she's king, and she's with the hair up, with nice clothes, and she's taking his path right now. What I'm seeing is this, the healing power of our ancestors' circles. Because it's not, Poetry Slam it's older than walk, because it's the griots in Africa, it's the aedos and the storytellers in Greece, the rhétoriceurs in France, the glosa in Brazil, the repentistas in Brazil, all this tradition that you have people around a fire telling the stories. They were missing, and we are recovering, because these are healing circles. They are connecting us with our memories, the things that we are forgetting, the way to heal, to share together. But instead of a fire, you have a microphone in the middle, you know. We are updating this old thing in our time, translating, like semiotic, people like to say, because I studied in semiotic, is a translation of an old way of being and being in community. This word community, communitary stuff. So it's inspiring. It's inspiring me and everybody. Sorry about my English. Sometimes the words came, I'm trying to translate from Portuguese to English fast.
I love that image of like bringing it and like filling it, the space, you know? I can't believe we only have 5 minutes left. I have a question that I get asked a lot that I want to ask each of you, which is for people who aren't used to reading or engaging poetry, or who are used to reading poetry from from school. Any advice that you would give for someone about how they can enjoy or experience poetry? And that's a question for each of you. Maybe we start with Sylvie.
Sing it. This is actually what I do when I write a text. I corrected several times, many times. It depends on the passages. Some of them just come perfect, others require a lot of work. But when all that is done, I read the text out loud, and everything that doesn't resist to that type of reading is eliminated and reworked. Very recently, I had the privilege of having a part of my poem put in what I would call an opera, and that was fantastic. It was not a long passage, but it was so moving. So I would suggest that one way to go about reading poetry is to select a passage and to read it out loud, to sing it. Okay, or maybe to just use a verse and put it in a place and come back to it and sort of immerse oneself in that particular verse and move on. Because I think poetry is an attitude. This is not just a series of verses, but this is more an attitude in the world. This is a particular understanding of the world, a particular relationship with the world, with the words in which one accepts not to understand everything, to sometimes fill the blanks with one's own imagination, and sometimes just let go, and trust that the word was there for a purpose, but for the time being, the purpose doesn't need to be deciphered, maybe later on.
Well, my advice would be...
or suggestion.
In Brazil, we say, if advice were good, we don't give it, we'll sell it. But my advice is be yourself. Because we're living in an era, we've been living in an era that reproducing stuff, in an industrial scale, but I think in this era we are getting in Aquarius. The gold that you have is the thing that you have. So some people say, I give this advice to my theater students. People say, I don't write, or I don't dance, or I don't sing. And I say, you don't sing like who? You don't write like who? Because everybody can write. Everybody can sing, dance, because everybody can feel. Because we're talking about poetry, not poem, the writing poem. Poetry that is in the poetry written, in the dance, in the smile of a children. Everybody can feel this. And everybody is there to everybody. They are making us, trying to making us believe that there is just some people that can feel it, that can go to an opera and understand it, but everybody can feel music. So what you have that comes from your ancestrality, for your memory, that you can bring and bring, that just you have, because it's not what you have, is the connections that you can do. Because just you live it, the life you live it, suffer the stuff you suffered, have the happiness you have the grandma you have. So I think how the most deep you go, the more you open, the more you, because this grandma is my grandma. When you talk deeply about your grandma, I remember Rosa, my grandma. But you got to go deep in this. Because, we are all humans, so everybody, you have a grandma, we have the pains, you have your love, our disillusions. So go deep in who you are. Is hip-hop taught me this self-presentation. And then, that's why these guys in Bronx, they wrote, Public Enemy, Chuck D, Fight the Power, ta-ta-ta. And then a guy in Brazil said, oh my God, he's talking about my neighborhood. How is possible? And so this is spread all over the world.
Thank you, Roberta. Yeah.
So the question is, how can people...
for people who maybe
don't how they can like poetry, yeah?
Well, actually not write, but like
Right.
read or
Read,
listen
yeah,
or experience.
yeah. So how many people here like rap? Rap. So you already, for me, like poetry. Because my poetry masters, they rappers. I'm telling you, Snoopy Doogie Dog. But no, did anyone? Don't laugh. In the sense, don't laugh in the sense. There's already poetry, books, poetries, read lyrics. If there's music, it's lyrics, yeah. But Snoopy Doogie Dog, and you can already listen to it in Spotify. Beautiful ones. I advise everyone. The rose that grew from the... That's a Tupac Shakur, is that? Tupac Shakur, Snoopy Doogie Dog, Public Enemy, Puff Daddy. They were... Manu Brown, but this is I'm talking about when I was a teenager. I'm talking about who got me into poetry. It wasn't I don't know, big
Shakespeare.
No, it wasn't Shakespeare. I'm really sorry. So I think it's really, and it's not a surprise that there's already a literature Nobel that won Bob Dylan, because there's a recognition that lyrics are poetry. And in fact, for instance, in Portugal, there's already some academics, they're exactly doing this type of work of picking up contemporary rap and publishing poetry books. So I think, because I always say before, a kid may not know how to speak, but a kid know how to shake, always. So I think music is a good entrance to poetry.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a great way to end the session, music.
We had she proposed some list, playlists for us, and we were exchanging till we come here. A playlist for our countries in Mayo. It was really cool.
We're going to share, so I'll make sure that we add to it, and then we'll find a way to put it on the Macondo website or something. Thank you so much. for this incredible conversation and for your wonderful questions. And it's just been such a treat.